All right, a familiar face returns to the Southeastern Conference. Hugh Freeze is officially going to become the next head coach of the Auburn Tigers. This is really not that surprising if you take a look at everything. We kind of walked you through this a few weeks ago when they decided to let go of Brian Harsin. We've kind of had our finger on the pulse of this entire situation from the very beginning. They started their search by going after Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin was in pursuit. And I think Lane Kiffin, regardless of what's said publicly, there was real, legitimate mutual interest on both sides. Now, what happened with Lane Kiffin is that things just got a little bit too drawn out. People started reporting that it was a done deal, which I think made Lane very uncomfortable. He had to come out and be strong in his press conference. And as a result, he couldn't really backtrack on that press conference. So I look at just how the way everything went down with Lane Kiffin and the relationship with Auburn. It just felt like everything with Auburn was moving a little bit too slow, and Lane wanted to pick things up. And ultimately, the timing just wasn't ideal for the two sides to meet and eventually come to terms. So they decided to go in the other direction. Lane did and Auburn did. They both went their separate ways. Lane has now re-signed a deal with Ole Miss. He's in great shape. He's going to win a lot of games. Going to be very happy there for the foreseeable future. They then took their attention and started to focus on Hugh Freeze. He wasn't the only one they focused on. They also had conversations with Carnell Cadillac Williams. He was the interim coach at the time. And they wanted to engage the interest of a couple other candidates. A few are probably obvious. A few you might not think much about. There were also a few that were completely removed from the possibility because they're playing on Championship Saturday, and Auburn didn't feel like they could wait an additional week. They had to hit the ground running on the recruiting trail because right now the recruiting class is in a tough spot, and the roster needs to be totally upgraded at several different positions. So they felt like timing was of the utmost importance to get this done and get this done as quickly as humanly possible. So they turned their attention to Hugh Freeze. He's their guy. He has tremendous support from some of the decision makers that are calling the shots down at Auburn. That's not always the athletic director, and that's not always the school president. So he was the hand-picked selection by those that run the program. Interpret that as you will. What I will also say about Hugh Freeze is this hire does come with a certain level of criticism. People are going to be uncovering different things about Hugh Freeze. People are going to be trying to look into Hugh Freeze's past. People are going to be very outspoken about whether or not Hugh Freeze should be the head coach at Auburn. They're going to document what happened at Ole Miss. They're going to document things that could have potentially happened when he was the head coach at Liberty. They're going to try to pull skeletons out of every possible closet. And I think there will be several people that are very adamantly opposed to Hugh Freeze having this opportunity. It's a polarizing hire, and I think it's a hire that some Auburn fans will be very, very disappointed in. All that being said, if you turn your attention to the field, Hugh Freeze does have a proven track record in the league of having put together a successful program. You're going to say, well, he did it a certain way that shouldn't be done. Well, I'm not going to speak on that because right now in the current era of college football, he has coached and led the Liberty Flames to back-to-back 8 or more win seasons. That's not an easy thing to do. 4 consecutive years in which he had his team playing at a high level. He's also 3-0 in bowl games as the head coach of the Liberty Flames. Of course, this would be his 4th year. They are bowl eligible, but they will not be participating as the head coach for Liberty at this juncture. 8-5, 10-1, 8-5, 8-4. That's where they're at right now. So he's done a pretty dang good job of building a program there at Liberty that is sustainable, that has been, for the most part, very, very, very solid. They beat Arkansas just a few weeks ago. Prior to his stint at Liberty, if you look at just the field, what went down at Ole Miss in 2012, not great, okay? Not a great performance by any stretch of the imagination. They, of course, had a lot of wins that were vacated, but if you look at just overall exactly where they're at, they were at their best a 10-win football team. There in 2015, they went on to win the Sugar Bowl. That's a significant achievement for Ole Miss. The year before, they were sitting as a solid contestant there. They ended up beating Alabama in back-to-back years, both 2014 and 2015. They got to the Peach Bowl there in 2014, where they ultimately got destroyed by TCU. But either way, 2 really quality years for Hugh Freeze and his team. And then in 2016, it didn't go quite as well. But either way, this guy has led a program in the past, and he has won big games in the past. Now, there are a few things that I am the littlest bit concerned about. There are some things about whether or not Hugh Freeze is going to be able to handle the pressure cooker that Auburn's job is. A lot of people have said he can get a little bit flustered. He can get a little bit frustrated. He can get a little bit angry. If he is, I guess, the subject of kind of, if the team plays poorly and people attack him, he will get a little bit upset by that. That is going to be just part of the job. You're at a heavily scrutinized position when you're the head coach at Auburn. You have to have thick skin. Will he display that throughout the course of his tenure? I also think the game has changed ever so slightly since he was last at Ole Miss. Coaching in the SEC from a week-to-week basis, he helped bring in and usher in a new era in the SEC, I might add. When he took over at Ole Miss in 2012, the league really prided itself along the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively. Well, he knew at Ole Miss that if they just try to run it down people's throats, it wasn't going to work. They had to implement the RPO. They had to figure out ways to outscore the competition. And he did so by really kind of bringing in a new era and, hey, illegal men downfield, tempo. He has a great offensive mind. But the rest of the world is now kind of doing what Hugh Freeze did 10 years ago. What made him innovative is kind of the offense du jour of college football nowadays. So how will he continue to change? How will he continue to evolve? And what will he do as a counterpunch to what Ole Miss did back in the day? You can't just do what he did 10 years ago. Everybody does it. It's not innovative anymore. So I think he will. I think he's got new tricks up his sleeve, and it'll be very interesting. And then finally, how good will he be in the portal? Because I think it's going to be very much expected of him to get in the portal and attract players today. Are players going to flock from all over the country to play for him? That's why I thought Lane Kiffin was such an attractive option for Auburn. Why? Because he is a destination for players that are in the portal that want to go play in an NFL type of system that will put them in position to stockpile numbers and position them to potentially get drafted at some point in the very near future. I don't know if Hugh Freeze is going to be able to bring in and attract players from every single corner of the world the same way Lane Kiffin was going to be able to do that. How good will he be in the portal is a significant question. And I think at the same time, Auburn has been a place that has very, very high expectations, and we've documented the challenge that it is being the head coach at Auburn, because it's not always about what you do. It's about how you do relative to Alabama and relative to Georgia. If Hugh Freeze is a 10-win team, but their 2 losses come against Alabama and Georgia, there's going to be some of the fan base that is a little upset with that. Now, I think that's ludicrous, but that's just par for the course. How will he do against Alabama and Georgia? Doesn't matter if Hugh Freeze is the coach or whoever's the coach at Auburn, that's always going to be front and center of the minds of many. So it is a very interesting hire. I'll be fascinated to see how things work out and what type of staff Hugh Freeze is able to put together, because if he can put together a good staff that can recruit nationally and that will become very much a fixture in the portal, because Auburn fans don't expect Auburn to be down for long. They're going to have to be back and be back very, very soon. Will guys flock from everywhere to play under Hugh Freeze at Auburn? We'll find out. But either way, this is a pretty obvious hire, especially knowing that things didn't work out with Lane Kiffin. They turned their attention on Hugh Freeze. It just took a little longer than most of us anticipated.